When you're a small business owner, you have to approach taxes in an entirely different way than when you're a W-2 employee. When you're a W-2 employee, your employer is withholding taxes from your paycheck every pay period, or they should be, right? And yeah, that hurts, right? Because sometimes you look at how much you made and then how much the government took, and it's like, wow, they don't leave me with a lot of money, do they? But that goes to a whole nother level when you become a business owner, okay? Because when you're a business owner, even if it's just you performing services for clients or the only person in your business, now you're completely responsible for your own tax situation, right? You don't have an employer now who's withholding taxes dutifully every pay period and remitting them to the government. Now you have to figure out how much you owe in taxes, not only to the federal government, but also to your state and or locality if you live in a jurisdiction that has a state or local tax obligation. And this is heightened to the nth degree once you've taken the step in your business to hire your first employee or employees. Because at this point, you're not only responsible for your own tax situation, but you're also responsible for those employees' tax situation, right? Obviously, if they're underpaying their taxes or not getting enough taken out, that's on them. But you definitely have an obligation as an employer to make sure they fill out the W-4 for you to withhold, income tax withholding and other withholdings based on the W-4, to withhold the Social Security and Medicare taxes from the employees. And then also, you as the employer have to pay half of your employees' share. Well, half of their Social Security and Medicare taxes, right? The employees have a share, the employers have a share, 50-50. And when it comes to business owners with significant back taxes, the biggest cases we get at Choice Tax Relief are payroll issues, right? Because it's not only the owner's income tax obligation that now they're behind on, but if they are withholding all this money from their employees' wages and not paying it to the government, now it's essentially the business owner is now kind of, in a sense, quote unquote, behind on not just his or her taxes, but for his or her 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 employees in the organization. And that can snowball really, really, really fast if they're not remitting those payroll taxes to the government as they should, and they're using them. They're not always using them to embezzle money out of the company. Sometimes it's because they feel they don't have the cash flow necessary to pay the payroll taxes because they have to pay other things in the business, right? So sometimes they have a justification for it. So before you hire that first employee, business owner, I want you to be very wary and understand what your obligations are. And I'm gonna give an example here of a case that we recently, or we actually are still dealing with here at Choice Tax Relief. This individual came to us for personal income tax debt problem, right? Small business owner makes a profit on a Schedule C, right? Didn't set aside small quarterly tax payments. Now he's gotten behind. Okay, so one of the things we ask of business owners when they come on board is, hey, we got to see that profit and loss statement. We got to see that P&L. We got to see how much your business is making, is cash flowing, right? We got to see that. So we asked this individual for his year-to-date P&L. He provided it. Okay. And everything's, looking good here. We got the income, I kind of see some, cost of goods sold, subcontractors, job costs, everything, some taxes here. I mean, yeah, the taxes probably shouldn't, like property tax. Maybe he might have, some kind of property tax obligation for equipment or something. I don't know. Utilities, okay, these all look fairly reasonable, whatever. And then, you see it. You see what I'm talking about? Wages. What? Wages? No one told us about wages. I don't see any payroll taxes on here that are being paid. Scary situation. So, where our mind went with this, typically, Oftentimes, business owners, they're not professional bookkeepers. They don't know how to book. But okay, maybe this is money like the owner's taking out of the business, right? And he's calling it wages, maybe, right? But then we looked through kind of the bank statements and we saw these checks, copies of the checks at the end of the statement, the canceled checks, and it's this looks like probably an employer relationship. He's paying a couple people pretty consistently every week the same amount of money. Okay, that seems employer-ish, right? And it's more complicated than merely, well, did this individual get like a regular paycheck from the business, right? I mean, there's other factors to consider, and there's three major categories of factors. Behavioral control. Does the company control or have the right to control what the worker does and how the worker does the job, right? So that's things like, can the worker just work whenever they want, or are there set hours set by the company? Does the company provide the equipment that the individual needs to do their job, or does the worker have all their own equipment? Okay. Does the company dictate where the does the company dictate where the worker works, or can the worker work, wherever they want, whenever they want, kind of thing, right? And then other things like, financial control, right? How expenses reimbursed. Typically if it's an independent contractor situation, the contractor is probably gonna, eat the cost of things required to do the job. Well, if it's an employee, they're not going to pay anything out of pocket, right? They're going to submit a reimbursement thing to the employer to get reimbursed, right? In relationships with the parties, right? Are there written contracts or employee type benefits such as a pension plan, insurance, PTO? Those all indicate an employee relationship. So, and then kind of in diving deeper into this with the client, it became clear that yes, this is probably a bona fide employer-employee relationship. Problem was, this employer in this case had not taken the proper steps to set up payroll, right? To do all the things, and it's not just federal stuff, it's the state stuff too, right? You got to file a new hire report with the state. There's state tax withholdings, there's state uninsurance, withholdings and payments that have to be made. And there's the federal stuff too, the federal income tax withholding, Social Security tax, Medicare tax, right? Those things all add up. And, so instead of just one problem now, this individual now has two problems, because now he has really two cases with the IRS. And this is a revenue officer was assigned to this. And, sure enough, the revenue officer scoped this out too. So, and then, we had to come back to him too. And just from a professional perspective, it's like, hey, you hired us for individual income tax representation, right? For sole proprietorship. This is a second case now that you also have a payroll tax case now too. Okay. That has to be negotiated. All right. So we had to, get more fees, for the services with respect to the payroll, right? Because now these are essentially two separate cases, one for the individual income tax obligation and one for the payroll tax obligation that we did not know about when the client signed up with us, because he didn't know about it when he signed up with us, right? So, that's my word of warning to business owners. If you're going to start hiring employees, make sure you do it right. Make sure you have the cash flow, not just for their salary, right? Or whatever you're going to be paying them as though they're an independent contractor, but also for their any benefits, any expense reimbursements, and especially for the half of the Social Security and Medicare taxes that you're going to have to be paying out of your own pocket as the employer for these employees. Okay, so just kind of word of the wise, something to keep in mind. Before you get in a situation like this where it's like, wow, okay, not only do I owe the IRS income taxes for my personal income tax, right? But also looks like I haven't been in payroll compliance either. Okay. This can be a really tough thing to dig oneself out of, especially if it's a startup and they're already running on fairly thin margins anyway. Okay. Folks, if this is you, if you start a business, you are behind on your income taxes, you think you might have a payroll tax issue too, you probably owe the IRS at least $10,000 in back taxes, at least, at a minimum. And so you therefore qualify for a free consultation with us here at Choice Tax Relief. Also, if you have multiple years, or in the case of payroll, quarters of unfiled tax returns, you also qualify for a free consultation with us here at Choice Tax Relief. Give us a call, 866-8000-829. That's 866-8000-TAX to schedule that free consultation, or you can go to choicetaxrelief.com, fill out the form on the website, and we will reach out to you. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.